What's up guys, my name is Ace, and this past Tuesday we got a massive buff to Black Ops 4. I already covered most of the details, specifically the weapon balancing details, so if you guys have missed that video, I will leave a link down below, and of course I will also leave a link to the patch notes. But within that video, it was getting very long, and I didn't have time to cover the perk adjustments. So today we're going to be looking at the buffs that Cold-Blooded as well as TAC got. And then at the end of the video, I'm also going to be sharing some hidden changes that happen to some weapon balancing for hardcore game modes. So first up, let's hop right into Tactical Mask. Now, Tactical Mask did get a buff within this update, and the patch notes stated it has increased resistance to 9-bang, concussion grenade, and razor wire now. So fortunately, I do have some pre-patch footage of this since I already broke down the Tactical Mask perk. And this is what it looked like when you had Tactical Mask equipped and somebody hit you with a fully charged 9-bang. Before this update, it would cut the time that you were affected pretty much in half. This is what it looks like after the update. And you might be able to tell that it is a slight improvement, but let's have a look at them side by side, and this is where you really start to notice the difference. You get your hand back on the gun and get yourself back in the fight noticeably faster now with Tac Mask when you get hit by one of those 9-bangs. I should mention that part of this was also a nerf to the 9-bang, but in either case, with Tactical Mask equipped, it is much more effective against a 9-bang now. This brings us to concussion grenades, and as you can see, once again, pre-patch, you were still stunned for a decent amount of time, even with Tactical Mask equipped. Now, post-patch, you can see that that time is significantly shortened, and you get yourself back in the fight a whole lot faster and more effectively. Once again, looking at them side by side, you can really start to see the difference here. This will make a difference between life and death in a lot of situations. And finally, this brings us to razor wire. The patch note stated that Tac Mask will give you increased resistance to the razor wire now after this patch. This is what it looked like pre-patch, and as you can see, you can make it through that razor wire and you're left with 95 health. And this is what it looks like post-patch. You make it through the razor wire and you're left with 95 health. So no adjustment whatsoever to the amount of damage that you take from razor wire, but let's put them side by side and see what they look like. And as you can see here, they're identical. The patch notes seem to be inaccurate in this area. Tac Mask seems to work exactly the same against razor wire as it did before. So that was the adjustment to Tac Mask. It's definitely a lot more effective against concussion grenades as well as 9-bangs, and this is going to save your life quite a bit, so it does make the perk a little bit more attractive to use. But just keep in mind, it's not doing anything extra for you after this patch against razor wire. It's still somewhat effective for getting through razor wire, but it's no more effective than it was pre-patch. So now that we have Tac Mask out of the way, let's cover Cold-Blooded. And Cold-Blooded was a perk that pre-patch was basically worthless. It would make it so AI would take just slightly longer to target you compared to your teammates, which might let you get that one rocket off before it ends up killing you, especially against something like an attack chopper. And also a big problem with Cold-Blooded pre-patch is when enemies were controlling streaks, they would see you as if you didn't have Cold-Blooded at all. So they'd see that red square or diamond around your body, and you'd be really easy to find. So let's start going through each of the streaks that changed with Cold-Blooded. First up, we have the RCXD. Pre-patch, when you were controlling an RCXD, a cold-blooded enemy looked exactly the same as a non-cold-blooded enemy. So cold-blooded did nothing at all to help you against an RCXD. Post-patch, as you can see here, that red square or diamond no longer appears, and same thing goes with the name tag. The name tag doesn't pop up above their head either. So cold-blooded does properly counter the RC car. Of course, you can still blow the person up with the RC car. It just makes it so you're a little bit harder to detect as an enemy. This brings us to the Hellstorm, and it was kind of the same story. Pre-patch, they would still have a diamond around them, but the perk that Cold-Blooded gave you against Hellstorms is they couldn't lock onto you with that Hellstorm. They had to fly it directly into you in order to get the kill on you. Post-patch, once again, they removed that red diamond, so now you can't even see Cold-Blooded users effectively when using a Hellstorm. You might still get lucky and kill them with a rocket, but you're not going to be able to see them from up high. Next up, we have the Sentry Gun, and pre-patch, it would take about 3 seconds for that Sentry Gun to lock onto you if you had Cold-Blooded equipped, so it would often give you time to get that one rocket shot off. Post-patch, it seems that they've actually doubled that timer. It takes about 6 seconds for the Sentry Gun to target you, which gives you plenty of time to either run past its line of sight or get a couple of rocket shots off, which if you lock on with the rocket launcher on a Sentry Gun, I believe it's only 2 rockets and that Sentry Gun will be taken out. This brings us to the drone squad, and before the patch, it seemed like Cold-Blooded didn't do anything at all to protect you from this. It would lock onto you and kill you almost instantly when you came around a corner with Cold-Blooded. And it seems like post-patch, this hasn't changed whatsoever. Cold-Blooded is not an effective counter to the drone squad. As for the lightning strike, I can just show you post-patch here. I just wanted to mention that with Cold-Blooded, you will still appear as a ping when the enemy first calls in a lightning strike. Moving on to the Sniper's Nest, this one is really difficult to really tell what's going on because it relies on that AI actually being accurate. But in either case, pre-patch, Cold-Blooded was a relatively effective counter most of the time to these snipers' nests because it seems like they would miss their shots and they just wouldn't lock onto you quickly. Post-patch, it's really hard to see any sort of a difference. I would say Cold-Blooded is still a very effective counter if you're trying to shoot a sniper's nest down. But of course, keep in mind, they still can target and kill you. Moving on to the attack chopper, I know this is what a lot of you guys want to see. Pre-patch, Cold-Blooded would usually give you that time to get that one rocket shot off on a chopper, and then you were basically screwed after that, it felt like. Post-patch, you definitely have even more time now against an attack chopper. This will often allow you to get those 2 rocket shots off very comfortably before it even realizes you exist. And I think in a lot of cases, you'll actually be able to get all 3 rocket shots off and take that chopper out. So finally, for score streaks, we have the gunship. And pre-patch, the gunship basically ignored Cold-Blooded. Every Cold-Blooded player on the map looked exactly like a non-Cold-Blooded user, which meant that they were glowing bright white, so they were super easy to see, and they also had that red diamond around them. So Cold-Blooded did absolutely nothing to protect you from a gunship. Post-patch, Cold-Blooded keeps you hidden from the gunship, so you won't glow white, you won't have a red square. Obviously, of course, if you still happen to be in the area when they shoot an explosive at you, you will die, but they won't be able to see you effectively at all. Another thing I wanted to mention with Cold-Blooded is pre-patch, it didn't appear to be working properly against a thermal sight, but post-patch, it now is working properly, so you won't show up glowing when somebody has a thermal sight and they're aiming at you. I think this might have just been a bug pre-patch, but just know that Cold-Blooded will now work against a thermal. Also, another thing I wanted to just update with the Cold-Blooded perk, this is something that hasn't changed with the update, just something that I didn't cover in my previous Cold-Blooded video, and this has to do with Cold-Blooded versus Vision Pulse. It turns out Cold-Blooded is a soft counter to the Vision Pulse. You will still appear through walls for several seconds, but that effect just wears off a little bit faster if you're using Cold-Blooded, which can help in some situations, but at the end of the day, it doesn't make that much of a difference. In my testing before, I didn't pick up on this because I didn't look at the clips back to back or side by side. I just kind of called the Vision Pulse in against a Cold-Blooded user and looked at it and said, oh, that looks about the same as before. It turns out it gives you a very slight advantage over somebody that isn't using Cold-Blooded. And with that, that's going to wrap it up for both Tac Mask and Cold-Blooded and the changes that were made with this most recent update. Now I want to get into the hidden weapon changes that were made for Hardcore that were kind of briefly touched on in the patch notes, but they didn't actually mention any specific weapon changes. They just mentioned the health change that they actually made in a previous update. It wasn't from this particular update. In a previous update, I covered this. They lowered the health in Hardcore from 30 down to 28, which allowed most of the SMGs to get a one-shot kill range in Hardcore to make them viable without affecting how good they were in core game modes at all. In doing this though, all of the assault rifles that had a minimum damage of 29, this made them a one-shot kill at any range, and it just made them even more powerful. So what they did in this update, and they didn't mention this at all in the patch notes, is all of the assault rifles that had a 29 damage range, they dropped that 29 damage range down to 27. So these assault rifles include the ICR, the Can-57, and the Vapor. For a few days before this big update, those guns were a one-shot kill at any range in Hardcore. They are once again back to where they were before when it comes to Hardcore game modes, and keep in mind this change has no impact whatsoever on core game modes, so don't worry about it if you only play core. This will have no effect on you at all. But for Hardcore, just know they now have that two-shot kill range that they used to have before. Also, I did want to point out this change applied to the Strife pistol as well, so it's the same sort of story. It had a minimum damage of 29, and then with that update where they lowered the health to 28, it was a one-shot kill at all ranges, and it has the handling of a pistol, so it was insanely powerful for Hardcore. They have cut that 29 damage range down to a 27 damage, so therefore it once again drops off to a two-shot kill at range. But this update didn't apply to the Mozu. The Mozu still has a minimum damage of 29, and therefore the Mozu is still a one-shot kill at all ranges, unless you're shooting through something or unless the enemy has armor. Now, one last thing I wanted to talk about before we wrap this video up, because I've been getting a ton of tweets and comments about this, is the Ghost perk. There has been a rumor floating around that the Ghost perk was silently buffed in this update and they just didn't mention it in the patch notes, and now it's better than it was before, because just before this update I made a video on the Ghost perk that showed that it only activates when sprinting, and even if you have an SMG or even your fists out and you're walking around, the Ghost perk won't activate at all. A lot of people have been saying that this has been changed and now you can be walking and it will activate that Ghost perk. At least on the console build of the game or on the PS4 build of the game, this is not true. The Ghost perk has not been touched at all. At least not yet. I do expect that it will be changed at some point in the future, and it appears that it may have changed on the PC build of the game, because somebody on Reddit posted that Ghost is working while walking, but he tested on the PC version. I've tested on the PS4, and it's still not working for you. So hopefully that clears things up for you guys that saw that post. And that's pretty much it. We're going to wrap the video up right here. But of course, I'd like to know in the comment section below, what are you guys thinking about the changes that I mentioned in today's video with Tac Mask, Cold-Blooded, as well as those hardcore changes to the assault rifles? Personally, I think there were some great changes. Tac Mask is a lot more effective against 9-banks and concussions, which is really good. That's the way it should be, in my opinion. And Cold-Blooded, I find, is a lot more viable now, at least to switch to if you want to take your streaks out. You can switch to that class pretty comfortably, take the streak out without having to die several times in the process. But at the same time, you're not going to be 100% completely hidden from streaks, which I think is kind of good from the perspective of somebody that's calling streaks in. If you enjoyed the video, a like rating is always appreciated, and don't forget to subscribe for more if you haven't already. I'll talk to you guys next time.
Yeah.